The sun's coming up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, begin anew. Happy New Year. My name is Ian. First Cup is a show where you and I make some space and some time to take things a little bit slower, be a little bit more thoughtful, to explore ideas that might need a little bit more time and a little bit more caffeine to process. And today, as I start this new show, I want to share some things that I came across while preparing to do so. Because you see, this first cup is not actually the first cup. There have been two other versions of this show in the past, so technically that makes this like the third cup, but whatever. Um, and while I was thinking about what to do with this first cup, I wanted to see what I had done before, what was worth bringing forward, what did I see, what did I learn? Well, a lot. First thing, the first version of this show was 8 years ago. That's a lot of time. That's a legitimate amount of history, right? Didn't seem like 8 years in my head, but it's been 8 years, right? First Cup first came around in 2016. I was the CEO of a startup called Power Level Productions. We were a production and design firm, mostly doing work with fandom. In fact, our motto was relationship counselors between fans and brands. And Power Level's first offices were in the downtown Long Beach WeWork. And it turns out that place, and specifically the kitchen, was really important to the genesis of First Cup. Because you see, in that kitchen, there was free coffee, right? But more than the free coffee, they had these mugs, which I absolutely loved. They were big, they were clean looking, they were white, they were unbranded. Uh, they allowed you to get an amount of coffee that really just kind of said, hey, here's enough caffeine to consider something. Here's enough to slow down. Here's enough to have like a conversation, like an actual conversation with somebody. And I thought this was kind of interesting, right? Because WeWork had so much of this kind of hustle culture thing going on, right? Like the go, 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 right? Startup culture. And yet they had these mugs that were big and invited you to just kind of put your hands around them on a cold winter morning and just be like, yeah, this is great, right? You know, you could talk to other people who had their offices there. They were in the kitchen, so conversation naturally happened. It was great, and that was actually the genesis of First Cup. Uh, First Cup was a show that we did on Facebook, right? And back then, I was talking about fandom and psychology and behavioral science and design and how all these things kind of interacted with each other. Right? It was great. I loved doing it. Fast forward to 2020, and uh, 2020 was many things, right? For a lot of people. Um, but that version of First Cup came around partially because it was a challenge to myself, right? I wanted to see if I could do a scripted show 3 times a week. And it turns out that I did. I was able to. I did over 60 episodes of it. But part of the reason that I had given myself that challenge was because technology had come to a point where I thought I could actually do it. It's good stuff. Now, what do I mean by that? So, uh, if you know me, you know that I've got pretty severe ADHD. And if you don't know me, well, now you know that, right? Um, in my head, it's like there's 8 streams of thought and information kind of bouncing around at any given time, right? At super high speed. Turns out that my hands are not able to type at the speed of my thought. But my voice, my mouth, it's somewhere in between those speeds. So it captures more of what's going on in my head. And the technology that had gotten to a better point was Google Docs. Like their voice to text didn't suck anymore. I could just kind of ramble much faster than I'm going right now. When I'm writing stuff in Google Docs, I'm bada 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 bada, right? Um, but Google Docs was able to pick up a lot of it, so there were fewer like dropped thoughts, fewer dropped ideas, fewer missteps, right? And then the other thing that came around was the Stream Deck, these great little tools, which if you've never seen them before, they're fantastic. There we go. See. Um, but you can program them to make it so everything can happen like literally at the click of a button, right? Like I could condense my entire show starting and ending into two buttons. No stress, no mess, one press, and you're off and running, or I'm off and cutting, right? Um, and today, while the show is not going to be fully scripted, I mean, clearly it's a little scripted today. Um, while the show is not fully scripted, I still use Google Docs, I still use Stream Deck. And from the 2016 show, like I still have the relative use of white cups, although you might see other ones show up occasionally. And you've got the idea of like taking up some time and some space, right? Um, but 8 years is a long time, like I mentioned, and there's a lot that's changed since then too, right? Like, you know, fandom has changed, sure, culture has changed, psychology and behavioral science have changed, technology has changed, politics has changed, right? I mean, 2016, uh, speaking about technology, like 2016, like it made sense for this show to be on Facebook. That's how long ago 2016 was, right? And 2020's version of the show was on Twitch. Twitch has changed a lot in the last 4 years. Facebook has changed a lot in the last 8 years. This show, uh, going on YouTube first, right? That's a first for me. But across those 8 years, and especially in 2020, um, there were a lot of things that were different, right? 2020's version of me was different too. Uh, the pandemic did a lot to a lot of people, for a lot of people, against a lot of people. Um, for my part, like I was an extrovert forced inside, right? I I didn't have that kind of ability to connect with people that was so nourishing to me, right? Um, in 2020, I was also grieving really, really heavily. My father had just died, and Power Level, that startup that I was running, uh, it had just died too. Um, the things that had brought me the greatest joy, the greatest nourishment in my life were just gone in 2020, right? Um, First Cup was a little bit of a response to that. First Cup was this little bit of an impulse on my part to connect with people. And oh my God, I'm so happy that I did, right? I made friends from that show and from the 2016 show, but especially from the 2020 show, right? I got to have great conversations. I got to meet people that I never would have met otherwise. I got to hear thoughts and engage uh, stories, life stories of other people that I never would have gotten to otherwise. Um, but in 2020, there was no guarantee of what would come next, right? And that actually kind of brings me to the last thing that I learned in reviewing all this stuff to get ready for this newest version of First Cup. And that there are two prominent themes in First Cup, no matter what the year is, no matter what's going on. And those themes are hope and will. Hope and will. Hope, like the principle that better is possible, better for ourselves, for our families, for our work, our communities, our societies, right? Will. It's the drive to be present, to be active, to do what we can when we can, even when we don't think we can, right? They've been a part, Hope and Will have been a part of every First Cup, every iteration, every episode. And what's more, they feed on each other. They support each other, right? And in fact, if you think about it, if you think about it, they kind of need each other, right? Because hope without will, well, that's despair, right? Like a belief in betterment without action, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of decay. And will without hope, mm, like at best, that's martyrdom, right? And more often, it leads to things like radicalization and dehumanization and just like a lot of existential threats, right? They need each other, hope and will, at least the way I see it. And because I see it that way, here, hope and will coexist. They nurture each other. They grow, and I do my best to give them the space to do so. And myself, especially when I'm doing this show. You know, and I hope that you might do the same, that you give them the space also, because just like hope and will are best together, first cup is best when, I hear from you. When it's not just me saying things, right? But when I hear back from you, maybe you've taken some time recently to think about stuff that has been consistent in your life despite all these changes going on. Maybe you've got a new project that you picked back up, that's like the third iteration or the fifth iteration, right? I'd love to hear about that. If that's what's going on. I mean, I'd love to hear about whatever's going on. Look in the notes here, leave a comment. You know the drill. Do the whole thing, because you know we need to take that time to think, right? Because we both get this new year. We both have a blank slate ahead of us. We both get to begin anew. Hmm. Now, no matter what I've said today or what you've heard, remember, death comes for us all. So it's a good idea to find love now while you can. I'll see you soon.